"Be prepared," was the motto of the Boy Scouts. The Scout Law outlined the qualities a Boy Scout should possess: reliability, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, politeness, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and respectfulness. Nick found himself at a loss for words after checking the email on his wife's iPhone. Normally, he refrained from looking at anything on her phone, and she was well aware of this. Consequently, she had not implemented any additional security measures. Nick, being a Boy Scout, respected others' privacy and did not intrude. However, with his wife leaving town in a few weeks, he needed to recall the name of her hotel. Although she had previously mentioned it, he had not paid attention to avoid potential arguments. Lately, their disagreements had become more frequent. This upcoming trip would mark the longest period of time they had been apart since their wedding 5 years ago, prompting Nick to consider a romantic gesture, such as sending flowers. Despite being in the romantic city of Paris, he knew that she would not be there for him, but rather for Dwayne, who was also traveling. Upon entering the password, their wedding date, to his wife's phone, Nick discovered an exchange of personal emails between Linda and Dwayne discussing romantic activities in Paris. The revelation of their affair was shocking, as was the fact that they used their work email accounts for their correspondence. Both Linda and Dwayne were legal professionals, with Dwayne working as a paralegal at Linda's law firm. The situation mirrored the affairs that Nick had encountered in his legal career, where infidelities often complicated cases. Nick's intuition had initially alerted him to something amiss when Linda had casually mentioned the trip, downplaying the opportunity to enjoy Paris together. Despite her dismissive attitude, Nick had never imagined such a betrayal. The email he read now cut deep, revealing Dwayne's desire for Linda to end her marriage. Linda's response indicated her willingness to continue the affair behind Nick's back. Nick, an experienced lawyer, instinctively preserved the evidence by printing out the emails. As he contemplated his next steps, he decided to act deliberately and avoid causing harm. His legal training taught him to think strategically, and he resolved to confront the situation with precision. Nick quickly located a hotel near the Eiffel Tower, close to where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case. He also researched Virginia divorce laws, refreshing his memory on the legal implications of adultery. Understanding the nuances of adultery accusations, including the concept of condonation, Nick planned his next move carefully. He aimed to gather evidence discreetly and avoid confrontation until he was fully prepared. With a sense of resolve, Nick packed his belongings and positioned his suitcases by the front door, ready to address the situation with clarity and purpose. Bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA statements, car titles, pay stubs, mortgage, and Linda's latest student loan balance were spread out on the table when she returned from her run. He heard her in the kitchen as he rose from his basement office. He decided to appear exhausted and out of sorts when he saw his wife. Her shoulder-length brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She looked good. It's a pity that she was disgusting in his eyes. He already knew that love was dead. "You know, I'm going to Paris," he said with a grim smile. The color drained from Linda's face. Her blue eyes turned pale. "What?" "Paris, Virginia." Her shocked expression quickly disappeared. "Sven just called," Nick continued. "We are testifying in an insurance case, and we must prepare a witness. Apparently, we just lost the motion to compel, the judge is upset, and the entire investigation timeline is in chaos. I'm going to be on the road for a few weeks, though I'll probably have the opportunity to stop by from time to visit." "Poor baby," Linda said, with an appropriate expression of concern. "Maybe your company is hiring." "I would prefer to go to your Paris," Nick said, seeing concern appear on her face again. But then she grinned. "Send me your resume." "Maybe you have the right amount of experience for us to consider you." It was a joke. Linda's law firm ranked higher in the rankings than Nick's. Then, perhaps with some guilt, she made a move as if she was going to hug him. But Nick turned and returned to his office before she could close the gap. The visions of him slapping her in the face were coming back, and he wasn't sure he could keep them under control. Back upstairs, Linda asked what he wanted for dinner. "I can't stay for dinner. I'll grab something on the way. Sven is going crazy and wants me to hit the road immediately," he spoke, bustling around the kitchen. Linda followed him to the door, looking a little worried. As he grabbed his suitcases and headed for the door, she pursed her lips for a goodbye kiss. "Sorry, I think I may have caught a cold. This morning I have a sore throat. Maybe it's an allergy, but I don't want you to catch anything." Linda followed him to the car as he loaded it. "When will you be back?" "Probably not before Friday. We're going to Roanoke after Paris. Then next week, we have to go to Baltimore." Perhaps he was becoming even more paranoid, but he thought he could hear the gears of her brain turning as he watched her avert her eyes, as if imagining how his absence would open up some unexpected possibilities for her. Waving goodbye, he backed out of the driveway. He hoped she would simply assume that he was busy with work and annoyed that he had been called on Saturday. His acting couldn't handle much more at the moment, but he suspected that she was already planning to invite Dwayne over. Nick drove until he came to a nearby shopping center with a coffee shop. Like most lawyers, he thought better by putting it down on paper. As he finished his coffee, he began to make a list of things that needed to be done. He paused for a moment to realize that he had never thought about reconciliation. That wasn't even an option. There would only be retribution. The only question was the degree of retribution. The ringing tone of his phone interrupted him. He didn't recognize the number. "Yes," he answered impatiently. "Mr. Buford, I'm Sam Granger. I don't think we've met, but I'll get straight to the point. I got your number from the internet. I'm in the business of buying old houses and tearing them down to build mansions. I know. Everyone hates what I do, but they don't hate me as much when I give them a check." Granger spoke so fast that Nick didn't have time to react, other than to think that the house wasn't old. It was cozy. And what the hell? He started talking about tearing it down, but then his rational mind took over. Well, I'd like to buy your house so I can tear it down. I would suggest building a shopping center, but I can never guarantee a timeline for new construction, especially with county permits and all. I make all my profit by getting these deals done quickly, and I think I can give you a very good price if you and your wife are interested in selling. Nick had a hard time keeping a grin-like smile from spreading across his face. Linda chose their house just before they got married. It was an old ranch, but it had a beautiful yard that was right next to an area of woods with a creek running through it. It was close to major highways, but secluded enough to be peaceful. What absolutely convinced her was the treehouse in the yard across from the master bedroom window. She loved that it was a home ready for children. Nick simply loved the price and the fact that it was only 20 minutes from the main parking lot of the subway system. That and a 30-minute train ride to work made moving to the area quite convenient. "Mr. Granger, I will be away for the next few days, so I cannot guarantee access to the property. Call me Sam. I don't need to see it inside. Like I said, it's a wreck, and I've already checked the outside of the house. Can you meet on Sunday morning, Sam?" "Certainly. By the way, I will probably close the deal myself with my wife's power of attorney. She's very busy with work-related matters these days." "No problem. I'll give you the form we use." Nick noted the address and began to see the outline of the plan. She felt safe with her Boy Scout, didn't she? This is because Linda didn't know that good old Lord Baden-Powell was using military intelligence as a model for what would become his boys' movement. Skills such as stealth, cunning, and self-confidence. In other words, ambushes. She'll never see what happens next until it's too late. But first, reconnaissance. To do this, he put his empty coffee cup on the table and went out to the car to get some privacy. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Frank," he asked when the call was answered, "I need a favor, and I need it now." Frank Barry worked as a private detective. In addition to his 5 years of corporate legal work, he also dedicated time to pro bono work, assisting underprivileged individuals with legal issues. This aligned with his personal values of leading a meaningful life, and provided him with practical courtroom experience that his regular job did not offer. A law school classmate recommended Frank to help with a challenging divorce case involving a stepfather accused of sexually abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence led to the man's release when the police's response was inadequate, ultimately resulting in a swift divorce. Nick, grateful for Frank's assistance, shared his appreciation and mentioned a treehouse in the backyard that could be used for surveillance purposes. Nick also discussed hiring a lawyer named Harry to handle his own divorce proceedings due to his wife's infidelity. Harry, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to meet the following day to begin the legal process. Nick then reached out to an old acquaintance named Maggie for support in dealing with his wife's actions. Despite initial tension, Maggie eventually agreed to help Nick, showcasing their shared history and mutual respect. Seeking a temporary refuge to strategize, Nick checked into an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax. Feeling the need to clear his mind, he dined at a nearby restaurant called El Mariachi, ordering tequila to calm his nerves. During his meal, Nick recognized the bartender as a familiar face from past legal proceedings, sparking memories of a previous case involving a client's daughter. As he reflected on his current predicament, Nick made mental notes and sipped his drink, finding solace in the familiarity of the surroundings. He then returned to the booth, trying to act as confident as possible, and found the bartender sitting on the opposite bench. "Senor Nick, good to see you," he said, reaching out to shake Nick's hand vigorously. Nick sat down, waiting for what the bartender would say. "I never thanked you for helping my cousin deal with that man she was married to." Nick tried to argue that it was nothing much, but the bartender ignored him. "He was severely beaten in prison. Did you know about this?" Nick nodded. "Yes, I heard. They don't think he'll be able to walk again or eat solid food." The bartender had a small smile on his face as he shared this news. Nick felt a chill as he looked at the bartender. "I didn't hear that," Nick said. The bartender shrugged. "This is yesterday's news. What brought you to El Mariachi alone on a Saturday night? Where is your charming wife?" Nick met the bartender's gaze. The bartender's smile was not mocking, but knowing. Nick couldn't understand why he asked such a strange question. How did the bartender even know Nick was married? Nick then remembered that Linda had surprised him by showing up at one of the hearings and kissing him afterward. The bartender must have still been in the courtroom. "We have some issues with her," Nick said. He saw no reason to lie or hide information. "Like she's having fun with someone else?" the bartender asked, again with a knowing smile. Nick was shocked and fell silent. "I'm not a lawyer, Don Nicholas, but I know that if you want to keep a secret, you shouldn't write it down and leave the paper in plain sight," said the bartender, pointing to Nick's notebook. It contained elements of adultery, drawings showing violence, the name Linda circled with a slash, and a to-do list that included the phrase, "burn the bitch." Nick shrugged. Poor operational security, but at least it didn't reveal any sensitive customer data. Any man in your situation should ask himself what he wants. What do you really want, Senor Nick? What would you want more than anything in the world other than money if you could choose your revenge? Nick didn't hesitate. "I want to hit her on the nose so hard that it breaks, and I want to hit her in the face so hard that both her eyes turn black. She has a very beautiful face and very expressive eyes. I want to destroy them." The bartender's smile widened. He chuckled, shaking his head. "You, my friend, are not thinking rationally. People who seek revenge so cruelly end up in prison. You don't want to go to jail, not unless it happens while you're visiting your clients, right?" The bartender paused and looked slyly at Nick. Nick nodded. "But maybe I can help with something. You helped my cousin with her issue. She could have come to me for help, but for various reasons, she refused. You, however, stepped in and took care of her." Nick tried to interject. "Sure, I asked Frank to gather evidence, but he made the police do the work. It didn't hurt when I asked one of the partners from my firm, a former assistant United States attorney from the area, to speak with the prosecutor to ensure the case was handled properly. I accompanied my client to ensure she received the respect she deserved from the prosecutor. Her divorce was straightforward after her husband's conviction in a criminal case." The bartender brushed off his protests. "You must understand that helping ordinary people like my cousin is commendable. I am in your debt on behalf of my family. I always repay my debts. I believe you could use some help." Nick looked at him intently. "I'm afraid I don't remember your name." The bartender's smile turned into a shark-like grin. "Some people call me El Diablo." "Devil?" Nick asked. The bartender nodded. "That's what people who don't like me call me. To my friends, I'm Jose Garcia." Now it was Nick's turn to smile. "What should I do to receive a favor from the devil? Sell my soul?" El Diablo's smile disappeared. Nick didn't smile either. "Be serious. You are a lawyer. You have no soul." His smile returned, and Nick knew he was joking. "Call it professional courtesy, Senor Nick. Now, just give me your address, your wife's name, and tell me her daily routine. What are you going to do? I have several ideas, but how does this phrase sound? Ignorance is bliss. I think you need to be blissfully unaware and be able to report on your movements over the next few months. Get yourself a burner phone so we can keep in touch. Leave the number here at the bar and don't return here again. It's for the best. Nick informed El Diablo about hiring a private investigator. His plans to stay home until Linda left for France, and Linda's travel plans. El Diablo knew of a hotel in Paris but did not disclose its source. Just one question, Senor Nick. Is there any chance of reconciliation, forgiveness, mercy? I don't want to hear later. I changed my mind. El Diablo looked Nick straight in the eyes. The smile disappeared, and his expression turned serious. Nick returned his gaze. Taking a deep breath, he paused to check his emotions. The path was clear. Trust and loyalty were his core values. They had left his marriage. Linda had triggered a shift in his feelings from love to hate. Over time, upon reflection, he simply wouldn't care. But that time was not now. No one. El Diablo relaxed. Fine, don't worry about anything. The waitress brought the bill. El Diablo shooed her away, but allowed Nick to tip her generously. He also permitted Nick to take a bottle of tequila, but warned him to pace himself. You need a clear mind for the battle ahead. Somehow, Nick woke up at a reasonable hour on Sunday morning without much of a hangover. He arrived at Harry's law office at 10 a.m. to find Frank already there. Sorry, Nick, Frank said. She definitely had sex with that guy in your bed. He was there 2 hours after you called me, and he was still there when I left this morning. We received a very good quality video. I made you a copy, but you might not want to watch it. Harry interrupted him. You better not look. I don't want you to do something stupid and get arrested. Don't worry, Nick said, taking the DVD from Frank. Give me the rundown. I climbed into that treehouse just like you said, and they were all over each other. I got really clear shots of their faces and, frankly, the rest of their bodies. They were clearly having sex. Anyway, I think it's just a physical thing. They hardly spoke. I don't know if this will change your plans. No, how long? They both had great stamina, thank you. This makes me feel even worse. Sorry. Anyway, I know Linda personally from the party you had last year, so I can identify her. We checked this guy's license plates. It's Dwayne Martin. We know he's working with her. We don't know how long this has been going on, but it seems to me that this is clear and convincing evidence. Oh, and we have a camera in a nearby tree filming the driveway and garage so we can see when they come and go. I will email you a remote link to the live stream on our secure server. I have spoken to Harry and I'm going to write a report and supporting affidavit for him to file. Sorry again, dude. Frank shook hands with Harry and Nick and left the office. So, what do you want to do? Asked Harry. File for divorce on the grounds of adultery, but don't serve her. Harry looked at Nick without any expression. Trust me, Harry. When I hear these words, I get an upset stomach. I don't want you to do anything stupid here. I predict that everything will go more smoothly than you imagine. Harry winced. Look, Harry, just file this on Monday afternoon right before the court office closes. Let me know the case number. I'll take care of the rest. Just remember, Nick, I don't practice criminal law. Not very good anyway. If you need to get out of some trouble, I can't help you. You'll be pleasantly surprised, Nick said as he walked out the door. Nick's next stop was to meet Sam Granger. It was a very productive meeting, where Nick learned that they could sell the house for over $100,000 more than the mortgage, all without real estate agent commissions. Linda would be delighted if only she knew. Nick promised to return with the proper paperwork as soon as possible to seal the deal. As Nick left Sam's office, he looked at his phone. No messages or calls. She must still be having fun with Dwayne. Nick took the opportunity to call his boss, Sven, and tell him that he urgently needed 2 weeks of vacation or he would quit. Sven immediately panicked because Nick was the only one who knew what was going on with the current affairs and agreed. Luckily, in Sven's case, they had a temporary lull in business so he could cut Nick some slack. Having laid the groundwork for the fulfillment of his intentions, Nick returned to his hotel to take care of his current work. By Monday evening, it was ready. Linda left voicemails on Sunday evening and Monday evening, which he did not respond to. He was saving all his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's camera in front of the house, Nick knew that Dwayne had spent Monday night there, and based on Dwayne's stay from Sunday evening to Monday morning, he would likely leave around 8 a.m. to head to work. Linda was leaving around 8:30 a.m., so at 7 a.m., Nick walked through the front door and shouted, "Darling, I'm home." He heard a sudden noise upstairs, and then Linda came down the stairs in her robe, disheveled and shocked. "Honey, what a surprise," she said, trying to seem cheerful but barely holding it in, and just as clearly on the verge of complete panic. "I thought you wouldn't be here until Friday. You didn't answer my calls." "Sorry," Nick answered cheerfully. "You know how it happens." Nick pretended not to notice the 2 glasses of wine left in the living room and headed straight to the dining room. Linda stood in the doorway looking at Nick, trying to figure out her next move and how to stop him from going up the stairs to where Dwayne was obviously hiding. A knock on the door made her jump. "Can you open it, honey?" Nick asked. Meanwhile, he began laying out papers on the dining room table and pretended not to notice as Linda squared her shoulders and went to open the door, perhaps expecting the bailiff to arrive with the divorce papers. Instead, it was Maggie who walked right in as soon as Linda opened the door, simply saying, "Hello?" Linda watched with curiosity as Maggie sat down at the dining table and opened her suitcase. "Sorry, honey," Nick said, "but I don't know when I'll be on air again. And, I can't think of you going on a foreign trip without renewing your powers of attorney. Just in case something goes wrong and we need to deal with some financial or medical emergencies. Oh, and I had a couple of moments over the weekend and got a tip on refinancing my mortgage at a really great rate. Since we are both going to be traveling, I thought this was the only time we would be able to do it. Sorry for the urgency." He tried to look apologetic. "Who is this?" Linda asked, pointing at Maggie when the artery in her temple stopped pulsing violently. "I'm Maggie. Maggie is a notary," Nick explained. Linda visibly relaxed. She still had a lover hidden upstairs, but events had not yet completely spiraled out of control. "You, my Boy Scout, always ready?" she said with a grin as she sat down, although her eyes were still wary. "It's just who I am, honey." He handed Linda a pen and began laying out the papers in front of her. "The flags with arrows show you where to sign. Take the time to read the documents if you want." "I trust you," Linda said with a wide smile, quickly signing all the papers in front of her. He prayed to God that she would do it, because otherwise he was screwed. As the saying goes, he who dares wins. Linda signed each document while Nick laid them out and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" asked Maggie. Linda stood up from the table to retrieve her purse. Maggie and Nick exchanged glances, but both quickly looked down at the table to stifle their laughter. Linda placed her driver's license on the table. Maggie took a photo of them with her phone and recorded the details in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie declined. Maggie finished marking the certified documents in her book, while Nick organized everything into separate folders. Linda's eyes continued to glance up, anticipating Nick's next move. Maggie left, tidying up her belongings and giving Nick a smile when Linda wasn't looking. Nick then excused himself, mentioning a conference call he needed to attend in his basement office. Linda's shoulders relaxed, knowing she would have time to discreetly handle Dwayne's departure before Nick resurfaced from his man cave. Nick went downstairs, feigning ignorance as Dwayne made his exit, and the garage door opened for Dwayne's departure. However, upon hearing the shower running in the master bathroom, Nick swiftly gathered his belongings, left through the basement door, and drove off without a word to his wife. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick found himself in Harry's office. Harry appeared shocked. "Will she testify that Linda carefully reviewed the documents?" Harry inquired. Nick responded cautiously, "I wouldn't want to prejudge or influence anyone's testimony, but Linda is an experienced trial lawyer. I trust she gave the documents the attention they deserved." The notary will confirm witnessing Linda Buford review and sign each document. Nick expressed hesitance in commenting on Linda's understanding of the document contents. "Let's try to keep this out of the news," Nick added. Harry mentioned Seth, a former student working as a law clerk in district court, who could expedite the process. However, Harry cautioned that live testimony might jeopardize the case, and Linda might need to reconsider her stance. Over the following 2 weeks, Nick distanced himself from Linda, sending sporadic text messages and avoiding her calls. As days passed, her calls dwindled. Frank informed Nick that Dwayne had not been seen at the house since Nick's surprise visit. Nick discreetly returned to the house to retrieve financial documents and signed a contract to sell the house with Sam Granger, scheduling the sale to coincide with Linda's trip to Paris. In the evenings, Nick frequented the gym, read, and reflected on his tumultuous life at 30. He informed Sven that he needed more rest, to which Sven reluctantly agreed. Frank mentioned Linda's renewed activities with Dwayne, prompting Nick to prioritize his exit strategy from the house. Nick watched the video footage Frank provided, observing the dynamics between Linda and Dwayne. Nick noted Dwayne's physical attributes and Linda's pursuit of an ideal, which he found superficial. As Linda embarked on her trip to Paris, Nick arranged for her belongings to be packed and moved to a storage facility. With Sam Granger's assistance, Nick swiftly sold the furniture. Once the house was emptied, Nick took a final stroll before completing his last task. He gathered the wedding photographs, album, and Linda's wedding dress, placing them in a fire pit beneath the treehouse. Carefully arranging the items, he set them ablaze, symbolizing the end of their marriage. After the fire, Nick was relieved to find that the video contained a wealth of detail. Each photo added to the pit captured their cherished moments together. A day later, Nick finalized the sale of his family home using a power of attorney from his wife, who had signed as her attorney in fact. Unfortunately, she had not thoroughly reviewed the documents she signed. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick deposited the proceeds from the home sale into his personal account on behalf of his wife and closed their joint accounts. 3 days later, during Linda's trip to France, a construction crew demolished the house, cleared the rubble, and began preparing the site. Regrettably, the tree that held sentimental value for their children had to be removed. A gazebo was erected on the new site, but construction halted when issues arose with the permitting process. Nick, along with a friend from law school who worked in the county permitting department, anticipated resolving the problem upon Linda's return from France. Despite numerous attempts to contact Nick, he remained unresponsive to Linda's calls, texts, emails, and voicemails. Concerned friends and relatives reached out, prompting Nick to reply briefly that he was busy and traveling to avoid unwanted visits to the house. El Diablo contacted Nick, informing him of Linda and Dwayne's apparent distress. El Diablo offered to return Linda's wedding and engagement rings, but Nick declined. Instead, he agreed to sell them to someone else. 2 days before Linda's return from Paris, Nick received the divorce decree from his lawyer, Harry, who advised him to count his blessings and embrace his newfound single status. Following a call from El Diablo urging him to take a vacation, Nick decided to visit his college friends in New York. He immersed himself in various activities, treating friends to meals and tipping generously to ensure recognition at his hotel. Nick sent a DVD depicting the burning of Linda's wedding dress and album to her parents' home. Upon learning of Linda's hospitalization, Nick's father-in-law contacted him, revealing that Linda had been kidnapped and assaulted. Nick callously dismissed his responsibilities, citing their recent divorce and Linda's infidelity. He callously mentioned having incriminating footage of Linda's infidelity, causing shock and disbelief. Nick's father-in-law demanded Nick to take care of Linda, but Nick refused, emphasizing that she was no longer his concern. He abruptly ended the call, feeling a sense of liberation from the situation. Realizing the toll of city life on his well-being, Nick decided to disconnect from his current life. He sent a farewell email to Sven and purchased hiking and camping gear from an REI store in Soho, preparing for a fresh start. Linda had never been fond of hiking, so this trip presented an opportunity to reconnect with his intelligence background. The hotel graciously stored his luggage for a reasonable fee, allowing him to venture into the Adirondack Mountains to immerse himself in nature until things settled down. Fortunately, he had his passport with him in case he found time to travel to Canada, which he did. Over the next 8 weeks, he mostly disconnected from his phone. Initially, it appeared as though a disturbed woman had taken his ex-wife's phone, as there were numerous messages, possibly hundreds, though he didn't count, filled with frantic screams and cries. He listened to just a couple before deleting the rest, along with many erratic emails. It seemed her account had been hacked. How could he possibly find time to read through all of this? He hoped that the troubled woman received the help she so desperately needed. 8 weeks later, Nick met Frank for drinks, with Harry also present. As they sat down, Harry clarified, "I terminated our attorney-client relationship immediately after issuing the divorce decree. I informed you via registered mail. Perhaps you haven't checked your email yet." "Not yet," Nick admitted. "It's quite a storm, my friend," Harry remarked. "Frank, what's your take?" Frank likened it to a typhoon, appreciating the level of destruction. Harry finished his bourbon and promptly requested another. "You start, Frank." Frank continued. "On Monday morning, Mrs. Buford arrived at her former residence with her parents. We hadn't removed the external camera. Upon seeing the vacant lot, she had a breakdown, falling to her knees, sobbing, and curling into a fetal position. She ended up kicking and screaming like a toddler at a late afternoon mall visit when a work crew arrived with equipment. Despite having raccoon eyes from beatings and a Band-Aid on her broken nose, she lost her composure once more when the construction workers noticed the tattoos on her face and began laughing." Harry took over the narrative, recounting how that afternoon, she and her lawyers from a prominent firm appeared at his modest office in an aggressive manner without an appointment. Making them wait for 25 minutes, he ensured his Glock was loaded and on his desk, grateful they were in Virginia. When they began yelling about urgent motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings, Harry found it challenging not to focus on the tattoos adorning her face in red and blue ink. After regaining his focus, he inquired about the specific issue at hand, prompting them to acknowledge the adultery allegations against his ex-wife. Harry then played a video showing Linda engaging in inappropriate behavior in the marital bed, catching them off guard. As they appeared bewildered, Linda accused Harry of not allowing her to explain herself, to which he responded that her reasons were irrelevant. He presented legal documents granting Nick the authority to sell the house and dispose of her personal belongings, emphasizing her signature on the agreements. When she claimed she hadn't read the documents, Harry highlighted an affidavit where she admitted her lover was present when she signed. This revelation caused her to lose consciousness, leading Harry to call 911. Despite her refusal to go to the hospital, she began ranting about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, which Harry dismissed as unrelated to Nick. He advised them to contact the Fairfax Police Department if they had a criminal case to discuss. Harry then shared another development, mentioning an anonymous email he had received that morning containing videos of Linda and her boyfriend in Nick's bed before their trip to Paris. The email threatened to circulate the videos to everyone Linda knew unless she dropped the matter. Nick, who was out of town, denied any involvement. Subsequently, the visitors left, and there were no further updates from them. Frank added that the police had visited to request copies of the videos and the report, but lost interest afterward. Neither Linda nor Dwayne could explain what had happened. All they knew was that they had taken a taxi from the airport, and the next thing Dwayne remembered was waking up in the hospital. Linda, on the other hand, woke up in a dingy hotel room where she had been hit in the face before going to the hospital. To her surprise, the room had been charged to her credit card, including room service and minibar expenses. Nick informed Dwayne that the hotel manager had mentioned that New York police had investigated his stay, and his New York friends had confirmed his busy schedule in the city. Rumors circulated that Dwayne's ex was undergoing laser tattoo removal in her parents' basement, with the procedure costing a significant amount due to the extensive coverage of tattoos on her body. Harry expressed sympathy for Dwayne's injured lover, noting the potential challenges ahead, including physical therapy and difficulty finding a new job as a paralegal. The fallout from their deteriorating relationship during the trip had a negative impact on their work, leading to a series of setbacks in an arbitration case. The firm ultimately had to let them go to appease the dissatisfied client and salvage future business opportunities. As they discussed the situation, Nick mentioned treating Maggie and her boyfriend to dinner as a gesture of gratitude for helping him regain his freedom. Maggie, however, corrected Nick about the non-existent boyfriend and demanded to be taken home for an apology. Nick agreed and mentioned stopping by the post office to send a card to a friend, bearing the Boy Scouts logo.